The first thing that comes to mind when I think of Bill Frisell is listening to him is a constant surprise. It's never predictable. He makes me think of felonious monks sometimes.
Hi, this is my first time doing a video like this, so I'm really not sure what's going to happen. I hope something interesting for you. Here we go. used to watch this program, the Mickey Mouse Club, would come on television. And every day there was a guy on the show named Jimmy, and he would come out with a guitar and they would play. I was fascinated with this enough so that I took a piece of cardboard and cut my own shape of a guitar and put rubber bands on it. And I must have been 4 years old at this time. I was 10 years old. I began to play the clarinet in the school band, and that was when I actually started really studying music seriously. And finally I got a very cheap guitar for Christmas or something, and I started messing around playing, adventure songs, or I would learn these songs like The House of the Rising Sun. And for me, that was where I really had fun. So the part of my mind that was working it was like a different part of my brain was working with the guitar than with the clarinet. And it wasn't until later that things started to come together. There was times earlier, like when I first started to play jazz, where I said, I don't want this rock and roll stuff, or I wanted to stay away from that because I thought it wasn't on such a high level. But then after a while I started to think that maybe that wasn't such an honest, it was part of my life, and the jazz musicians that I really love, the greatest ones, when they play, you hear their life experience. A lot of my strength is in my left hand. That's what one thing I was saying, where people spend time learning this picking and playing in positions, but for me it's kind of interesting to try to find ways of breaking these patterns, like sometimes really limit yourself in a very, say this second string is the only string I can use, and that's my whole instrument, and just try to make some music with that. That's, if you spend all day just playing a C major scale, a C major scale on the second string with one finger, how about that? I cheated, I used this finger, but and then things start happening that maybe you wouldn't think about. Like here I was slurring around and not just picking everything, just trying to use as much imagination as possible with this little amount of guitar. A teacher that was very important to me, his name is Dale Bruning. He was my first real serious guitar teacher. He's the guy that introduced me to Jim Hall, and he was really an important person for me. And he was really into, as Jim is also, he was really into trying to find ways of phrasing melodies that were more similar to the way a saxophone player would play. Just that, if you just think about that, the way a horn player plays, they tongue notes and they slur, like when you if you play a saxophone, you can just blow in it and push the keys down, and it's a smooth, slurred sound. He gave me one exercise that was a real sort of mental problem, especially after learning to play all up and down, picking all the time. He would have me, like where I would play a scale, picking everything, he would say, okay, play that scale, but slur all the half steps in the scale. So first you have to think, well, where are the half steps? That kind of slows you down. And then it breaks up any kind of pattern that you have with your right hand. Also, I guess there's other where you could play slurring all the notes that you play on one string. Attack the first note. Like with the same, I'm playing a G major scale with 3 notes on each string. There's a million ways to. It's just something to think about again. For me, that's also kind of an interesting thing to. You can get sometimes some more dense or more dissonant things using open strings, where your hand is not wide enough to do certain things, like just where I like the sound of trying to play scales in combinations of strings that are right next to each other, and many times with open strings it has kind of a harp, like that kind of stuff. Again, maybe if you take a C major scale, starting with the high E string and E, D, C, and then B, A, G, F, E. There's a bunch of different ways, but I could probably spend a few hours trying to figure out all the possibilities, but it's something to think about. That I like that sound. It's almost like what a piano player can do by putting on the sustain, or just holding your fingers down on a piano and letting them. And then also with harmonics, and combined with fingering notes. Everything I'm playing, I'm trying to keep in the key of C. There's a lot of harmonics and open strings. Letting all kinds of things ring. I love that sound. And so maybe I could even I'll play the melody just on one string. I'll play the melody just on one string. I can use an open D string then this brings to mind, I mean, there's this thing with playing notes that ring together. Within that D major scale, I'll try to, still playing the melody, maybe I'll try to add some of those little notes in there and see. So instead of thinking of just full chords, or combining, like if you play a chord to state something, use the melody or the chord to sort of anchor where you are and then fill in with some of these other notes. I like to do that. Starting from the guitar, the first thing I go into is this distortion box, and then there's a little delay pedal going to another delay, sort of a sampler delay, and then a reverb unit, and from the reverb I split to 2 amps, so it's sort of a stereo reverb thing. And this is pretty much my usual setup now. For a long time I used to use a volume pedal. For 20 years or so I used a volume pedal with a compressor, and after a while it took me that long to figure out that they were canceling each other out. I mean, the compressor would make the volume sort of smaller, and then I would use the volume pedal to bring it up and down. So if I take them both away, I can pretty much do it, control the dynamics with just the strength that I play with my right hand. So the distortion thing is nothing new for anyone. I think it's just whatever, I use that occasionally. Then this delay, I have it set, I usually just leave it set the same. It's you can hear this gradual decay and these repeats, but I use it more to try to get more sustain from things that like if the attack isn't so strong, you don't hear that repeating effect, and it's almost like having again, putting the sustain pedal down on a piano. It's just a little subtle. It's not, I mean, here's without. Maybe it sounds exactly the same. Maybe I don't need this one either. I don't know. It's just a little bit more something in there. This has less to do with the sound. I almost think of this as another little musical instrument that I use to react with. It's like a little recorder that I can play things into and it'll play back to me, and sometimes I respond to it, and it's an 8-second delay, which means I can, in the space of 8 seconds, I can play a phrase or and then see, no hands. And then I can control the speed of I can play something, and then before it comes back, sometimes I'll try to manipulate the speed so that it'll come back in sort of an altered way. But this is fun. It's, I don't know, a little toy. It's fun to just mess with it, and sometimes I'll just, it's like playing with some sometimes I also use this to set up kind of maybe a drone or something, like something, just some kind of vague harmonic bottom. And then I can hold it in there. Also enter little bits of things into it by turning it on and off. It'll just pick up little just turning it on and off. It's kind of cool what happens sometimes. Changing the speed of that. So anyway, that's fun. Then from here, I'm going to this reverb unit, which sometimes I can use that also for kind of more sustain, if depending on, I can control the length of the reverb So it's like this is a way of sort of artificially setting up, like certain rooms that you play in have their, I mean, every room has its own reverb. This is a way of either going against what's in a room, or it can be an effect. You could say it's an effect, but also it can help you to make a room feel, if you're in a real small, very dry room, you can use this to give the impression that you're in a big, spacious place. Human-made effects. Like sometimes people notice that I'm moving the neck a little bit, changing the pitch. That's another one of these unconscious things that I do. And I think where it comes from is, especially when I play a full chord, there's always some note in there that sounds a little bit out of tune for me. And it's like I'm trying to compensate, like I play this C chord and this G string sounds a little off, so I sort of bend the neck to try to fix that note, and then all the other notes go out, so I bend it back, and I end up sort of just, so I'm not intentionally trying to make a vibrato effect, or it's more trying to get the chord to be in tune. Because it's never in tune. Nothing. It's just hard to get the guitar in tune. So I think that's where that came from. You don't have to just play the notes or the. I mean, it's like just try anything with it. Different harmonics will come out by hitting it in different ways. Or I still got this delay on, but just scraping it. You hit it in a different place, and it'll. I haven't figured that out in a systematic way, but there's no reason to not use the whole guitar. with a standard song, or it's really any song that I play, the melody, I always say that it's just so important. I mean, that's what makes it gives like an architecture to what you improvise, that I think if you combine all the theoretical knowledge you learn with chords and scales and patterns, but keep that melody going, that's what can give you your own individual sound, really. So there was the melody with nothing, with alone, and for me that's a beautiful thing, right? It's a complete. You don't need to play big fat chords or reharmonizing. I mean, if you add the bass notes, then the melody and the bass notes. That's getting pretty full there. It's kind of there. It also gets into some kind of odd fingerings, because you're thinking you have to find ways of, usually on the upper strings to play the melody, and then you've got a couple strings left to find a bass note that might. So a lot of times you end up with these odd, what would be considered wrong ways of playing. Again, not in a position. I'm just sort of, sometimes I don't even know where I'm going to end up. But I know there's an F there. There's an open D there. What I'd like to say is that then once you get that sort of outside skeleton together, then you could start looking for little other notes in between, still not thinking of full chords, but let's see, let me try that again. Some of the things we were talking about before with these scales that run together, notes that run together, I like to use smaller intervals. Like seconds, or that's a big sound with only a couple of notes. So I'll try to, I'm going to try to think of, I'm going to still use the melody and the bass note as my frame, and then I'll be a little bit freer with, maybe I'll limit myself to seconds or something and see if I can think of something to put in between. That's another thing that I was lucky enough to be able to study with Jim Hall. He showed me some things, like where I was talking about playing up and down on one string. If you start adding intervals to that, like go through all the intervals, again, this could take your whole life just to, but there's a C major scale. If you do it in fourth, or seconds, I use that a lot with bassline melody, and then try to find intervals that have a color that you like or some quality. Another thing that's interesting for me is to use the melody sort of as a statement, and then think of sort of like having a conversation with yourself, like play the melody and then answer what the melody is saying with either another phrase or a chord, or like comp for yourself, or whatever. But that can go on, like I could do that all day, just keep playing the melody, and then you could the melody sort of is what gives me ideas, even to play things that are wrong, just to see what they sound like. Just I don't even know what I did there, but if you keep hearing, I just keep saying that over and over again, melody, 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 it can also give you more freedom to find harmonies that maybe aren't even in the key or the just think of sound. Yeah, there's just a little bit I wanted to say about this tune. the way we distribute the parts with Joey and Kermit and myself, it's a very simple idea, but it's where each person sort of has their own rhythmic space. The melody is happening, it's very slow, and it's always right on the one of each measure. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's, couldn't be simpler than that. And then there's just these three elements that we use, really. The bass line is on the off beats. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, like that. So the combination of the melody then there's also like sort of a right on beats 2 and 3 is like just a chord. So 1, 4, 1, 4, 1. So when you put it all together, I don't know if I can do it by myself, but it's each. So there's 3 players, and we sort of each have our own little area of space. It's all very tight, but we all have our own little area that we're in, so it gets this kind of back and forth stuff going on. A lot of times Kermit will play 2 of those parts, or who knows what I'll do, or Joey, I don't know. He's out of his mind, so we never know what he's going to play. The trio with Kermit and Joey, we've been playing together for so long now. It's just an incredible luxury for me. It almost feels like I can just play. It's like I'm alone. I mean, it has that kind of freedom.
These guys are very loving in the way they listen, and they embrace your ideas, and we give each other room and space. So I think that carries through.
I just try and keep thinking all the time, like just to listen, sometimes to decide to compliment a sound that, Kermit or Bill, or a sound that I hear coming from both of them. And sometimes I just decide to go against it I'm not sure what it will bring, but the main thing is just to keep thinking and keep moving ahead, not to sit in one place.
lot of my music comes from these little pieces. You know, I like little scraps of things that I put together. And then for arranging these tunes, many times I'm thinking. That's not true. I was going to say I think about who I'm going to play with. When I'm actually writing, I'm not thinking about that. But after the tune is finished, then I think, well, I wonder if this would sound good with Kermit. And then I look at it and say, oh, Kermit could play this, and he could. Well, with the groups that I play with, I think the most enjoyment I have is when all the roles are blurred, right? Where there's not a. Of course, sometimes there's a soloist, or there's someone out in front, or there's things are. One thing is more important than the other, but it's very interesting for me what happens inside the music, the inner parts and the accompaniment. Even if a person is playing what would be considered a background part or a bass part, or they can find their own way of interpreting it, and that's what's really exciting. Even if I write it a certain way and then someone sort of finds their own way of playing it, that's really exciting for me. I wanted to talk about the difference between playing with this trio and then my new quartet, where there's violin, trumpet, trombone, and guitar. Texturally, it's much more dense, and it's a lot more to navigate around with what I play. I mean, I have to be more. I can't just play anything I want, because there's a lot of other instruments. It's just a kind of a bigger sound. It's also rhythmically it's a challenge without having bass and drums. Like with Kermit and Joey, there's this really strong rhythmic force there all the time, and I can, if I want, I can go against it or float over the top of it, or I know that thing is there. Whereas with the quartet, it's a much more delicate situation with each, or there's a lot more responsibility with the rhythm on each one of us to keep it. I say it's delicate, but I'm hoping that group can also have a rhythmic kind of a power without the bass and drums. But that's a challenge, and it's it's a new group, so I'm trying to learn. We're all trying to learn how to play together. We're all trying to learn how to play together. I've seen this before.
Something's wrong with the sound.
Now I know why you clipped my band.
Yeah, this just sucks.
No, I had fun today playing. We haven't played for quite a few months, so it felt really, really great to play again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.
Hi, Mom.